I thought love meant sacrifice until the night he told me my dying mother wasn't his responsibility. I buried her alone, and then I buried the version of myself that tolerated him. What came next still haunts me. Welcome to Reddit Toxic Family Telltales channel. New episode every day. When my mom was dying of cancer, my boyfriend made it crystal clear that her pain, and my pain, didn't matter to him. He refused to pick up her medication from the pharmacy that was literally right next to his gym. His excuse? Not my responsibility. He thought using my dying mother as some twisted lesson would make me stronger. Instead, it made me realize exactly who he was, and I made sure he'd never forget the lesson I taught him in return. We'd been together for 3 years, living under the same roof for one. Then my mom's cancer came back, fast and aggressive. Doctors told us she had 4 months. She didn't even make it to 3. Those weeks hollowed me out. I was dragging myself through work, then driving 40 minutes each way to the hospital every single day. I was juggling medical paperwork, insurance calls, and trying to make her last days bearable, while watching her slip away. And the entire time? I never once asked him for help. Not once. Until the day my car broke down. All I needed was for him to pick up her prescription. That's it. A quick stop on his way home, right next to the gym he went to every day without fail. He didn't even pause his game when he looked at me and said those 4 words that blew our relationship apart. Not my responsibility. Then he added, you need to be more independent. 2 weeks later, I buried my mother. And this man, who never visited her, never lifted a finger, had the nerve to stand at her funeral, shaking hands, nodding solemnly, acting like he'd been the rock holding me together. My family had no idea. They hugged him, thanked him for supporting me. I sat there seething, already knowing what I'd do. That night, while he sat in front of his computer headset on, laughing with his friends like nothing had happened, I made my choice. If my struggles weren't his responsibility, then his entire life was no longer mine. The next morning, I stopped setting his alarm. For years, I'd made sure he got up for work on time. Not anymore. He woke up 2 hours late, panicked, running around like a headless chicken while I sipped my coffee and shrugged. His problem, not mine. Then came breakfast. For 3 years, I cooked for him every morning, packed his lunch, made sure he ate like a king. Now? Nothing. He lived off greasy fast food for a week before whining that he felt sick and bloated. When he complained, I just looked him dead in the eye and said, your health isn't my responsibility. Laundry was next. His clothes piled up fast, and before long he was re-wearing the same shirt 3 days in a row. His coworkers started making comments about the smell. Embarrassing? Sure. But hey, not my responsibility. I stopped managing his schedule too. No more dentist appointments, no reminders about renewing his car registration. He ended up missing both, got slapped with a no-show fee and a ticket for expired tags. He stormed and furious, demanding to know how I could let it happen. And all I said was, it was never my responsibility. Groceries? I bought only what I needed. He stood in front of the empty fridge, genuinely confused about why his protein shakes and prepped meals weren't magically appearing anymore. Cleaning? Forget it. His gaming corner turned into a disgusting landfill of cans and chip bags until ants showed up. Even his family got a taste. I stopped reminding him of his mom's birthday, his brother's graduation, or that huge work presentation he'd been prepping. Every time he raged about it, I calmly repeated the truth. Your family isn't my responsibility. Your job isn't my responsibility. And his friends? They started noticing. I quit planning the dinner parties, quit arranging golf outings, quit making sure we had a social life. Within a month, it all collapsed. His best friend pulled me aside and said, you've been really cold to him lately. I almost laughed. I told him, his feelings aren't my responsibility. Work was the nail in the coffin. I stopped proofreading his reports, stopped fixing his presentations. His boss noticed the dip in quality, and he came home stressed, bewildered at how everything was crumbling. He wanted to talk about being a team, about supporting each other. I looked at him and reminded him of the night he told me, when my mom was dying, that it wasn't his responsibility. Things fell apart fast after that. He forgot his quarterly review because I didn't add it to the calendar. He called me 15 times in a panic, but I didn't answer, because his job wasn't mine to manage. He bombed it, and his promotion started slipping away. Then came the finances. He broke down crying when he realized rent hadn't been paid and his cards were maxed. I used to handle every bill, every payment. Not anymore. When he asked how I could let it get so bad, I looked him in the eye and said, your finances were never my responsibility. You just assumed they were. And then the final move. One morning I got up early, packed every last thing I owned, and loaded it into my car while he snored off 6 beers from another late-night gaming session. I glanced at the calendar on the wall. He'd agreed to host his boss and his boss's wife for dinner that night. The man had planned nothing. As I stood in the doorway of our filthy bedroom, looking at him drooling into stained sheets, surrounded by the chaos of his own making, I heard the doorbell. Peeking through the peephole I saw them, his boss and wife dressed for dinner, standing there waiting. And him? Still passed out in his boxers. This was it. The moment where I had to decide, was I going to cover for him one last time, or finally let his entire life collapse under the weight of his own choices? The doorbell rang once. Twice. Then a third time, harder, more urgent. I could practically see his boss and his boss's wife standing on the porch in their neat, pressed clothes, probably double-checking their phones to make sure they had the right night. The dinner Matthias had promised them. The dinner he'd completely forgotten. The bell rang again, followed by sharp knocking. My purse was already over my shoulder. My car, packed with every box that contained my life, not his. 3 years together, whittled down to 2 hours of packing. That's how little of the apartment was really mine. The giant TV? His. The gaming rig? His. The surround sound system? His. I had been living inside his life, managing it, holding it together, while mine was buried under the rubble. The knocking turned to voices. Matthias, hello? It's David. David Chen. His boss. The man who basically held Matthias's career in his hands. And now he was standing outside that disgusting apartment while Matthias slept off a six-pack, half-naked, surrounded by stale beer cans and pizza boxes. I slipped out the back door into the garage. As I padded down the echoing concrete stairwell, the knocking turned to pounding, then shouting. Matthias. What the hell is this? David's voice bellowed from above. And then I heard a woman, Carla, David's wife. I remembered her from last year's holiday party. She'd complimented my shoes back then. Now her voice was high-pitched, horrified. David, we should go. This is, oh my God, look at this place. I couldn't help it. I smiled. By the time I reached my car, David had clearly gotten inside. Matthias never locked the door when he passed out gaming. So now his boss was standing in the middle of his pigsty, staring at his star employee unconscious in his underwear. I slid my purse into the passenger seat, started up my little Honda, the car I'd paid for, maintained, fueled, all by myself, and listened to the chaos above. Wake up, Matthias. David roared. We're here for the dinner you scheduled. The dinner you confirmed yesterday. Instead, I find you passed out drunk at 7 p.m. on a Friday. Carla's voice cut in, sharp and disgusted. David, there are ants. And mold. Nobody could live like this. Matthias's slurred voice finally entered the mix. Confused. Whining. Wait, what? Why are you in my apartment? I put the car in gear. David's voice carried one last time, clear and furious. You told me you were too sick to work today. Sick? You're finished, Hunter. Do you hear me? Finished. And with that, I drove away. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of them leaving the building. David gesturing wildly with his phone, already calling HR, probably starting the paperwork to end Matthias's career right there in the parking lot. Carla shook her head, heels clicking against the pavement, looking every bit the disappointed witness to his downfall. My phone started buzzing in my purse, but I didn't bother to look. I didn't need to. I already knew it was him. By the time I stopped at a gas station 20 minutes out of the city, I had 15 missed calls from Matthias. 3 from his mom, Gail. A flood of texts filling my screen. Where are you? What did you do? My boss was here. Please answer. This is your fault. You knew about the dinner. Delete. Silent mode. Done. 40 minutes later, I checked into a roadside motel. Nothing fancy. Just clean. Just mine. The desk clerk barely looked up from his phone as I handed over cash and signed in with only my name. Not his. Not ours. Just mine. For the first time in 3 years, I was free. The room was small, one bed, a little desk, a TV, but it was enough. I sat down and took a breath. A real breath. The first full inhale since my mom got sick. Since the weight of carrying both my life and his crushed me into silence. By midnight, my phone showed 47 missed calls. 20 voicemails. I held down the button. Delete all? Yes. Confirm. Gone. And then Gail called. His mother. A woman who had always been polite but cold. Careful. Distant. Against my better judgment, I answered. Honey, she began, voice cautious. I'm sorry to call so late, but Matthias is here. He's very upset. He says you left. That you're gone. He's not making much sense. Do you know why he's so upset? He mentioned something about his boss. I stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen and said flatly, you should ask him. His life isn't my responsibility anymore. What do you mean? She pressed. You're his girlfriend. You live together. Of course you're responsible for each other. Am I? I asked. Was he responsible for me when my mother was dying? Silence. Then she spoke again, slower this time. Matthias said you've been cold since your mother passed. Distant. Cruel. I laughed. Not angrily. Not bitterly. Just a quiet, almost amused laugh at the story he'd spun for her. Did he tell you about the prescription? I asked. There was a pause. What prescription? When my mom was dying, I said, my car broke down. I needed him to pick up her pain meds. The pharmacy was literally next door to his gym. He went to that gym every single day, Gail. Every day. For 3 months. And one time I asked him to pick up her medication on his way home. Do you know what he said? Her voice was barely above a whisper. What did he say? He said it wasn't his responsibility. That I needed to learn to be more independent. And on the other end of the line, nothing but silence. My mother was dying. I hadn't slept in weeks. I was drowning in bills, medical forms, insurance calls, and he couldn't even drive 30 seconds out of his way to grab her pain meds. Why? Because, in his words, it wasn't his responsibility. On the phone, Gail hesitated. That doesn't sound like him, she said, but her voice wasn't confident anymore. She was remembering, rethinking, connecting the dots. Your son isn't my responsibility, I told her, steady and final. Not anymore. He made that clear when my responsibilities didn't matter to him. Goodbye, Gail. I hung up and blocked Matthias everywhere, phone, email, socials, every app. Then I changed all the passwords on the streaming services, Netflix, Hulu, Disney+, HBO. All were in my name, paid for with my card. If he wanted to binge watch something, he could figure it out on his own. The next morning, I woke up refreshed for the first time in months. No alarms to set for him. No breakfast to cook. No schedules to manage. Just me on my own time. I called our landlord from the motel parking lot. Sharon was practical, the kind of landlord who didn't put up with nonsense. I need to be taken off the lease, I told her. I've paid this month, but going forward it's just going to be Matthias. He'll need to sign the modification, but I'm not living there anymore. She hesitated. And if he refuses? Then you should probably do an inspection, I said carefully, and maybe ask him about his job status. A beat of silence. Then softly, that bad? Let's just say his boss stopped by unexpectedly. He wasn't impressed. She sighed then said, I'll stop by tomorrow. And honey, I'm sorry about your mom. I remember when you moved in. You mentioned she was sick. Thank you, I said and meant it. Funny how my landlord showed more compassion than the man I'd lived with. At work that day I walked in lighter. Rebecca, my coworker, glanced up. Wow, you look different. Good different. Everything okay? I'm great, I said and realized it was true. But around lunch Gail called again. Against my better judgment I picked up. I spoke to Matthias about the dinner, she started. He says he forgot because you always handled the calendar. Is that true? Yes, I said simply. And you stopped? I stopped doing everything after he told me my dying mother wasn't his responsibility. He says you sabotaged him. That you deliberately let him fail. I didn't let him do anything. I just stopped preventing his failures. There's a difference. Her tone shifted. Not angry now, but curious. What else did you stop doing? Everything, I told her. Laundry. Meals. Bills. Appointments. Groceries. His family events. His work reminders. Every single thing he declared wasn't his responsibility when I needed him most. Her voice dropped. His boss fired him this morning. Deactivated his badge. He's been calling you nonstop from my phone since you blocked him. He wants to know why you did this to him. I didn't do anything, I said. I just stopped doing it all for him. If his entire life collapses without me holding it up, that's not on me. What does that say about him? There was a pause. Then she said something I'll never forget. It says I failed as a mother. I should have taught him to take care of himself, instead of waiting for women to do it for him. For once I didn't feel the need to reply. Silence said enough. Then she whispered, almost broken, the prescription. Did you ever get it? I closed my eyes. I took 3 buses, Gail. 2 hours each way. My mom was in agony the whole time. She cried from the pain while I sat on those buses. And when I finally got home with her medication, Matthias was at the gym. Posted a selfie about grinding, no excuses, while I was dragging myself across the city for his one responsibility. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Your son isn't my responsibility, I said again, softer this time. Maybe now he'll finally learn to be responsible for himself. And then I hung up. The silence afterward was healing. No buzzing phone. No endless demands. No what's for dinner texts. Just quiet. For the first time in years I had the space to think about my own life. 3 weeks of peace passed. Then, out of nowhere, Israel called me. We'd met at a party, texted casually since. But this call? It felt different. Hey, he said, sounding exhausted. I know we had plans tonight, but my meeting ran way over. I'm wiped. Still want to see you though. What if I cook instead? My place is closer to your office. I froze. A man who was tired wasn't canceling. He wasn't pushing the responsibility onto me. He was offering to cook. That sounds perfect, I said. His apartment was nothing flashy but clean. Lived in, organized, not buried under chaos. He had actual groceries in the fridge. While he cooked, he poured me a glass of wine and we talked about our day. At one point, while stirring vegetables, he said, "You mentioned your mom passed recently. When's her birthday? I'd like to remember it if that's okay." I told him October 15th. He immediately pulled out his phone, added it to his calendar. No prompting. No asking me to remind him. Just responsibility. My dad died 5 years ago, he said quietly. Cancer too. The anniversaries are hard. We talked about grief over dinner. Honest, real conversation. He did the dishes without even asking, just started cleaning up while we kept talking. When I offered to help, he handed me a towel. No fuss, no complaints. Just partnership. 2 months later, October 15th came. By then, Israel and I were officially dating. That morning, he texted, "Thinking of you today. Want company at the cemetery, or would you rather go alone?" I stared at the message. He was giving me a choice. Support without pressure. Something I'd never experienced before. Company would be nice, I texted back. 20 minutes later, his car pulled up. He stepped out with a bouquet of yellow roses, my mom's favorite. I hadn't reminded him. I'd barely mentioned it months ago. How did you remember? I asked. I put it in my phone, he said simply. Important things about important people. That's what calendars are for. We stood at my mom's grave together. He didn't fill the silence with empty words. He just held my hand while I told her about my new promotion, my new apartment, and this man who remembered things without being asked. She would have liked you, I whispered as we walked back. I would have liked to meet her, he said. The woman who raised someone as strong as you must have been incredible. That night he cooked again. And without planning it, we had already fallen into a rhythm. Cooking together. Sharing the load. Choosing responsibility together. 6 months after I walked out of Matthias's life, I saw him again. It wasn't planned. I was paying for gas when I caught sight of him through the window at Pump 3. He was wearing a wrinkled fast food uniform, the kind of polyester shirt that looks like it's been through too many wash cycles. The car he was driving looked ancient, duct tape holding the bumper in place, rust eating through the sides. He wasn't swiping a card. He was flattening crumpled dollar bills, feeding them into the pump one at a time. $5. Just 5. I watched his shoulders sink lower as the numbers on the screen ticked up. That was Matthias without anyone holding his life together. I stayed in the store, pretending to flip through magazines until he finished. But instead of driving off, he headed toward the door. Toward me. Our eyes met through the glass and his face went pale, then flushed, then pale again. I turned away, asked the clerk about car wash prices like nothing was happening. When the door opened behind me, I felt it, that old familiar weight of his presence. A presence that once meant home, but now meant absolutely nothing. Pack of Marlboro, he said hoarsely. The red ones. Cigarettes. He used to call smoking a weak man's crutch. But there he was, blowing his last few bucks on a pack. Keys in hand, I walked past him without a word. He said my name, quiet, desperate, but I didn't stop. I picked up my pace, pressed the lock button on my fob when I was still 10 feet from my car. Please, he called after me. Just let me say something. I slid into my seat, locked the doors, and started the engine. From my rearview mirror, I saw him standing there in that stained uniform, clutching his cigarettes, looking exactly like what he was. A man who'd lost everything because he never cared about anyone but himself. 2 weeks later, an envelope showed up at my apartment. Thick, heavy. The return address was his parents' house, but the handwriting was his. I knew it instantly, the same handwriting from the grocery lists I used to write out, the reminders I used to stick on the fridge. I didn't open it. I dropped it straight into the trash. His feelings, his explanations, his sudden need to be heard, none of it was my responsibility anymore. That weekend, Gail messaged me on Facebook. I'd unfriended her, but she still found a way. Matthias is in therapy now. The therapist had him write down everything you used to do for him. It came out to 3 full pages. He can't believe one person managed all that. I didn't reply. What was there to say? That I couldn't believe it either? That I'd been drowning for 3 years while he sat back oblivious? Instead, I talked it through with my therapist, Dr. Adams. She'd been helping me process not just my mother's death, but the loneliness of carrying it all alone. Do you feel guilty? She asked, the same question she'd asked me a dozen times. And for the first time, I didn't even hesitate. No. I feel nothing but relief. His life is finally hard. And honestly, not even as hard as mine was. I was juggling my grief and his entire existence. He's just handling himself now, and even that's too much. Dr. Adams smiled. That's not cruel. That's called consequences. A month later, I got a message from Antoine. Hey, I know things are awkward with you and Matthias, but you should know he missed Jake's graduation. Again. Law school this time. His mom's beside herself. And instantly, I remembered Jake's undergrad graduation. 3 years earlier, I'd bought the card, put it in the calendar, reminded Matthias every single day. We'd made it on time. He'd taken the credit. His family had praised him for being such a thoughtful brother. This time? No reminders. No calendar notes. Just Matthias, failing the people who loved him. That's sad, I texted back. And it was. Jake was a good kid. But it wasn't my problem anymore. Meanwhile, my life was moving forward. Israel and I had been dating 8 months when the topic of living together just happened. Over breakfast, reading the paper. My lease is up in 2 months, he said. Mine's month to month, I answered. Want to look for a place together? Something that's ours. Yes, I said. And it was that simple. No drama. No manipulation. No weight hanging on one person. We split the apartment search evenly. He made spreadsheets comparing rent and amenities. I scheduled half the viewings, he scheduled the other half. When we found the perfect 2-bedroom, both our names went on the lease. Both credit checks. Both responsible. The day we moved in, he walked into the kitchen holding a dry erase board. I was thinking we could do a chore chart, he said, almost shy. Not because I don't trust you to do your share, but so we both know what needs doing and nobody ends up carrying it all. I kissed him right there, surrounded by boxes. He understood what Matthias never had. Partnership means sharing the weight. We divided everything evenly, not just chores but emotional labor too. He handled his family. I handled mine. He remembered his friends' birthdays. I remembered mine. When his mom got sick, he took time off work and cared for her himself. I supported him, but I didn't take over. When my car needed repairs, he drove me to work, but I handled the mechanic and the insurance. A year to the day after I left Matthias, Gail sent another message. He's dating someone new. A girl from therapy. She's 22. Says she loves taking care of him. I want to warn her, but I know she won't listen. I didn't listen when David's mother tried to warn me 30 years ago. I couldn't help myself, I looked her up. Young. Eager. Already posting about cooking elaborate meals for him, writing captions like love means putting someone else first. My heart sank for her. I saw myself in those photos. Bright-eyed, convinced that sacrifice was love, that keeping someone else afloat was the same thing as partnership. Israel found me staring at her profile. You okay? He asked. I'm great, I said, closing the laptop. Just watching history repeat itself. Want to talk about it? Not really. Want to cook dinner instead? That night we made pasta from scratch. He kneaded the dough while I stirred the sauce. We moved around each other in the kitchen like two people who knew the steps of the same dance. And I realized, this was what partnership was supposed to look like. Not one person drowning while the other watched. But two people side by side, both holding the weight together. Matthias. The man who once couldn't even remember his own brother's graduation, now standing in a wrinkled fast food uniform, driving a rust bucket held together by duct tape, counting out crumpled bills just to buy cigarettes with his last $10. That was his life now. The same man who once told me my dying mother wasn't his responsibility. Meanwhile, 6 months later, Israel was on one knee at the restaurant where we'd had our very first date. He'd planned it all, checked my work schedule to make sure I wasn't overloaded the next day, invited my closest friends, picked the perfect time so the lighting was good for photos. He even secretly called my jewelry designer friend to find out my ring size. "I want to build a life with you," he said, voice shaking just a little. "A real life where we both show up for each other." I said yes. Not because of the perfect proposal, but because Israel had proven every single day that he knew what real partnership looked like. Wedding planning? It was shockingly easy. He researched venues, I looked at caterers. He handled the music, I handled the flowers. When his mom wanted to argue about the guest list, he dealt with her. When my aunt stirred up drama about seating charts, I dealt with it. Split down the middle like it should be. "This is weird," my friend Isla laughed while we were dress shopping. "Where's the stress? Where's the groom who shrugs and leaves everything to you?" "Try dating someone who acts like an adult," I said, slipping into a gown that shimmered like mermaid scales. "It's a revolutionary concept." I sent Gail a wedding invite out of courtesy. She politely declined but added a note. Matthias saw the announcement on Facebook. He spent the entire day drinking in his childhood bedroom. "I'm happy you found someone who deserves you." The wedding was beautiful. Israel and I each handled our parts, and when little hiccups came up, neither of us dumped them on the other. His mother, Carla, pulled me aside during the reception. "I've heard a bit about your past relationship," she said, her hand warm around mine. "My sister went through something similar. Her ex couldn't even remember to feed himself without her doing it." "It's different with Israel," I told her, glancing at my husband as he spun his grandmother around the dance floor, careful not to let her stumble. Carla nodded. "I know. I raised him to be a partner, not a project. His father and I split everything, still do 40 years later." She hugged me tight, whispered in my ear, "Thank God you knew your worth. So many women never figure that out." Her words stuck with me. Through our honeymoon, through settling into married life, through the quiet moments where I'd remember how different everything used to be. 2 years flew by. 2 years of shared responsibility, mutual respect, actual partnership. I'd been promoted twice. Bought my own car. Built my own life. The woman who once set Matthias's alarms felt like a ghost of someone I barely recognized. Then one Saturday at Whole Foods I saw her. Not her literally, but a version of me 3 years ago. A young woman, maybe mid-20s. Beautiful, but exhausted. She was pushing a heavy cart, checking items off a list while her boyfriend, easily in his 30s, trailed behind, glued to a game on his phone. The sound effects were loud enough that people turned to stare. "Babe, did you get my protein powder?" he asked, eyes still on his screen. "It wasn't on the list," she said, already defeated. "I told you yesterday I was out." "No. You mentioned it while I was on a work call and I asked you to text it to me." "Whatever. Just get it now. Vanilla if they've got it. Chocolate if they don't." And she turned that cart around, her shoulders sinking, while he kept right on playing his game. God, I wanted to grab her by the shoulders and tell her the truth. That his protein powder wasn't her responsibility. That his memory wasn't her job. That she was drowning and he was the weight tied to her ankle. But she wouldn't have listened. I wouldn't have listened either back then. Not when I thought love meant sacrifice. At checkout it was déjà vu. She unloaded the cart while he scrolled on his phone. She pulled out her card while he never reached for his wallet. When the cashier asked if they wanted help out, he said yes before she could even answer, and then walked ahead, leaving her with the cart. I watched her load every grocery bag into the trunk alone while he sat in the passenger seat with the AC blasting. She returned the cart, slid into the driver's seat, and he didn't look up once. I sat in my car, haunted. Haunted by the ghost of who I used to be, the girl who thought that was normal, who thought that was love. Then my phone buzzed. A text from Israel. "Hey, I'm at the store picking up flowers for tonight. Want me to grab anything else while I'm here?" I smiled. My husband was voluntarily making a second trip for flowers, asking if I needed anything, not because I asked, not because I reminded him, but because he cared. "Maybe grab some of those chocolates your mom likes," I texted back. "Already did," he replied with a smiley. Great minds. That night our dinner party was flawless. We moved around the kitchen like we'd been doing this dance forever. Him plating salmon, me arranging appetizers. Our friends watched us and shook their heads. "You two make it look so easy," Isla said, sipping wine. "Remember when you were with, what's his name, and you did everything yourself?" "Matthias," I said, topping off glasses. "Yeah, I remember. Whatever happened to him?" James asked. "Last I heard, living with his parents," I said evenly. "Working retail." Miguel's girlfriend, new to the group, tilted her head. "Were you together long?" 3 years, I said. 3 years too long. Israel appeared right then, kissed my temple and asked softly, "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I told him. And this time I meant it with every part of me. The conversation drifted on to lighter topics, work, vacations, the new restaurant downtown everyone wanted to try. But later, Isla pulled me aside while the guys argued about football stats. "You look happy," she said softly. "Like, actually happy. Not the fake everything's fine happy. The real kind." "I am," I told her. And I meant it. Turns out it's amazing what happens when you're with someone who acts like an adult. She shook her head. I still can't believe he wouldn't pick up your mom's prescription. When you told me that story, I wanted to key his car. I laughed. Honestly? It was the best thing that could have happened. If he'd helped that one time, I might have stayed. I might have spent my whole life managing his. Isla raised her glass. To dodged bullets. To dodged bullets, I agreed, clinking mine against hers. Later that night, after the guests had left and we'd cleaned up together, Israel washing, me drying, we sat on the couch with the last of the wine, enjoying the quiet. Your friends are great, he said. I'm glad they like me. They don't just like you, I told him. They love you. Isla says you restored her faith in men. He laughed. Well, the bar was pretty low after your ex. Underground, I teased. The bar was underground. Then he looked at me seriously. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if he'd been different? If he'd actually helped when your mom needed it? I thought about it for a long moment. I'd probably still be setting his alarms, I admitted. Still packing his lunches. Still living his life instead of mine. Israel pulled me close. His loss. His loss, I agreed. But the truth was, it wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about the life I'd built. The partner I'd found who understood that relationships mean both people showing up. The version of me who finally knew her worth. I thought about that girl in the grocery store, the one pushing the cart while her boyfriend scrolled on his phone. She was probably still meal prepping his lunches, setting his alarm, tracking his appointments. Drowning the same way I once was. Maybe one day something would wake her up. Maybe he'd fail her when she needed him most, and she'd realize his life wasn't hers to manage. Or maybe she wouldn't. Maybe she'd spend years, decades, losing herself in the role of caretaker, while her own dreams gathered dust. Not everyone gets the wake-up call. And that's when it hit me, I didn't hate Matthias anymore. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel bitterness. I felt nothing. Pure indifference. And that is the strongest revenge of all. Almost a year later, Gail sent me one last message. I almost ignored it, but curiosity won. He's getting married. To a girl who reminds me of you 3 years ago. She does everything for him. I tried to warn her, but she thinks I don't understand their love. I just wanted you to know you were right about everything. His life wasn't your responsibility. I just wish I'd taught him that sooner. I didn't reply. What could I say? Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. And Matthias would never learn his, because there would always be another woman willing to carry his load, confusing servitude with love. I closed the message and went back to my life. My real life. The one I'd built for myself. Israel and I were planning a trip to Europe we'd researched and saved for together. My team at work had just landed a huge client. I was training for a half marathon. I was living. Not existing as someone else's support system. The woman who once set Matthias's alarms was gone. In her place stood someone who knew this truth. The only life you're responsible for is your own. And once you truly understand that, you're free. One morning, Israel's alarm didn't go off. His phone had died overnight. He woke up late, panicked. Why didn't you wake me? He blurted, running around. I didn't know your alarm didn't go off, I said from the bathroom. He stopped, blinked, then laughed at himself. Right. My alarm. My responsibility. Sorry. That wasn't fair. You're okay? I asked. Yeah, I'll call my boss from the car. It's my fault anyway. That evening, he came home with flowers and takeout from my favorite Thai place. For being an ass this morning, he said. I was stressed and took it out on you. You weren't an ass, I told him. You caught yourself and corrected it. Still, he said. You're not my alarm clock. No, I agreed, smiling as I grabbed the pad Thai. I'm not. And you know what? That weekend, he bought a charging station for his nightstand and set 2 alarms. Because that's what adults do. They solve their own problems. They take responsibility for their own lives. And that's why this story matters. Because love isn't servitude. Love isn't drowning quietly while the other person lives comfortably on your back. Love is partnership. Balance. Showing up for each other. Thanks for watching. Today's train wreck is over, but tomorrow's ride is already on track. Subscribe so you don't miss it.